again, my friends, and welcome back. Today we are looking at something I have been waiting entirely too long for. The Genesic GaoGaiGar from TakaraTomy's Toyrise line for, well, GaoGaiGar. GaoGaiGar Final to be exact. And this has been a long time coming when it comes down to it. And he's a big box, just so you can see here. He's a very big box. Just for comparison, here's this box next to the King X Kaiser. Keep this box sizes in mind here in a little bit. And just again for some more scale, here's a hot rod. You can see how big that box is. We got some beautiful photography of Genesic GaoGaiGar and all of his God of Destruction glory. And we got some images there in the back showing the different Gao machines within. Like the TakaraTomy logo, the GaoGaiGar Final logo, Toyrise, T-Spark, all that good nonsense. Here we have GaiGar going down the side, more Genesic GaoGaiGar, GaoGaiGar Final. On this side, we have Genesic GaoGaiGar. On the top, we have upside down Genesic GaoGaiGar because they kept putting that stuff upside down on the box. On the bottom of the box, look, more upside down images. Man, they're just terrible about this upside down images. One of these days, somebody's going to take me serious on that. And then, of course, on the back of the box, you got your full product shots showing off the different things that it does. And yeah. So much like King X Kaiser, I was absolutely floored and unprepared for the size of this figure. And here he is, or here they are. And the reason I was absolutely shocked by the size of the figure, well, here's the King X Kaiser I previously reviewed. Who came in a smaller box. He's small. Oh, yeah. I was really not expecting that. Again, I'm sure there was something somewhere in Japanese that said how tall it was. But much like King X Kaiser, I wasn't really paying attention and don't read Japanese. So, hey, that's a thing. So yeah, he's kind of small for a GaoGaiGar figure. Just for a quick comparison, get it out of the way. Here is the Mini Pla Gaigar. You can see how those two look together there. And then here is the real grade model kit Gaigar, and you can see those are pretty much nearly the same size. That gives you an idea of scale. And then just once again, here is Hot Rod and a Megatron. So you can see he's a little bit taller than a Hot Rod and he's a bit smaller than a Megatron. The fact that this figure exists is actually a huge deal. Now, you might not realize that it's a huge deal, especially if you don't know the backstory of everything, but it is. It's a very big deal that this figure exists. It's a long overdue figure. And I'm actually going to tell you why. Yep. We're going to have a toy history lesson today, folks. Now, maybe you don't want to know toy history, and maybe you're just like, is the figure shit or not? Get to the point. Well, I'll try to put a timestamp down in the comments if I remember to to skip the toy history and just go straight on to the rest of the review. But I really want to talk about this because it is, again, a big deal. So I mentioned in my King X Kaiser video that the Brave series was created as a replacement for Transformers, using the lessons they learned from Transformers Victory and kind of ignoring the bad bits that came out of Transformers Zone. Again, it reused Transformer designs that were not released for Transformers, also reused Transformers characters as new characters with new sculpts, new paints, like the Dinobots, Deathsaurus, they all appeared in that. But This was done in partnership with Studio Sunrise, which, of course, they had been working with Studio Sunrise even before it was Studio Sunrise. And Studio Sunrise was an independent studio until 1994, when Sunrise got bought out by rival toy company Bandai. Now, at the time, Sunrise was still an independent studio, but the writing was kind of on the wall at that point. Now, the way that partnership worked is Takara would design the toys, and Sunrise would build the story around the toys. And officially, on paper, because it was their story, Sunrise owned the Brave series. So, by extension, Bandai bought the Brave series out from Takara's nose. But again, Sunrise at this point was still considered an independent studio and just under the Bandai umbrella. That wouldn't change until the early 2000s. But like I said, the writing was on the wall. But if you know your local American toy history, you know in 1994, Transformers had already made its comeback with Generation 2 and going into the Machine Wars and specifically Beast Wars, which hit in 1994. So the line that this toy line was created to replace was already coming back. So a couple years later, they came to the decision that it was time to just go ahead and close out the Brave series. And for that closeout, they created GaoGaiGar, and they went all ham on this line. So there are no reused Transformers, no repainted, retooled Transformers, all original. Gone is all the robots combined into one big thing. Instead, you had separate teams of robots that combined together. It was more about their individual powers. You didn't have big swords. Instead, you had tools and fists of fury. They went so hard into anime and mecha anime references and nods and homages. They also decided to give, half the country intense seizures, even if they weren't epileptic, through massive strobe effects through a whole bunch of episodes. And it was a huge smash hit. So much so that it hung around long after the Brave series came to a close. Again, there's tons of GaoGaiGar figures out there, but the originals were made by Takara. And big deal for the original Takara GaoGaiGar was Gaigar himself was articulated, very similar to the articulation on what we know as Laser Optimus Prime. Very similar articulation style because, they were already, innovating with the return of Transformers. So in 1997 is when they aired this. But at the same time, in 1997, that's when they started airing Beast Wars in Japan. So Takara was already ready to move back into Transformers. But they didn't quite give up on the Brave series idea, or rather the formula to Brave series, as they started experimenting and creating things like Diegunder and Web Diver as a replacement for GaoGaiGar specifically, a little bit more kid-friendly. But Bandai had some other ideas. So years after GaoGaiGar came to a close, they created a spin-off, Better Man, which was a little bit more adult horror theme than GaoGaiGar. And then they returned to GaoGaiGar with an OAV series, which was more adult in the fact that it kind of has a batshit insane plot that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense when you think about it, but all the cool action and fight scenes just make you not think about it. And they added adult things like a new girl character whose entire gimmick is that she overheats because she's a cyborg like the pilot of this guy, and she has to get naked to cool down. Oh, and two new transforming robot girls who combine, but only when their boobs light up. Light up boobs. I'm not kidding. It's supposed to be a sign that they've reached, they're in sync. Their emotions and their minds are in sync. So obviously when a woman's in sync with another woman, I guess that's supposed to be hot flashes. And so their boobs light up. I wish I was making that up. But anyway, at that point, the partnership with Takara was gone. So Takara didn't get to make anything for the new GaoGaiGar. They were just sort of, brushed aside. Granted, they kind of brushed themselves aside as they moved on into Transformers. And so Bandai's been giving out the GaoGaiGar license for many years to different toy companies. Of course, they also produced a Soul of Chogokin figure, which is about the same size as the original GaoGaiGar. So now, many, many years later, got all of these toy companies doing partnerships, and a lot of people are, ragging on them for it. But people sort of forgot that Bandai and Takara years ago announced a partnership. And what first came out of that partnership really wasn't that, really wasn't that impressive. We had a few, neat little things, but in the last few years, we've been seeing some crazy things like Takara making Macross figures and finally returning to complete GaoGaiGar. But they didn't stop here. Not only are they doing this GaoGaiGar, they're doing GaoFiGar, which also appeared in GaoGaiGar Final, and they're releasing the original GaoGaiGar, but in this new scale and new format, with the parts to make the Star GaoGaiGar as well. And they're all interchangeable with each other, so you can mix and match pieces however you see fit, which is kind of cool. But on the downside, it's a smaller figure, but it's a solid figure. I will give it that. But anyway, that's why this is a big deal. And now you will be graded on the test on this later, so don't forget anything. I'm kidding. Anyway, so here is everything that you get in the box with GaoGaiGar. Let's take a look at all the bits and bobs and pieces. So right here we have our Protect Gao, our little dolphin, and the counterpart, Broken Gao, a little shark. And of course, these replace Liner Gao. And as you can see, they're really well sculpted, really well detailed. They do have some nice little paint apps, but they're also really kind of stumpy and chunky back here for the transformation. So they're not the most accurate, a little bit weird, wonky looking, but they do get a little articulation thanks to their transformation. Both of them, their tail fins can, move like they would. The one downside, though, is the other side is full of black screws. And this is going to be a problem with all these pieces. They all have the big black screws with lots of screw holes. And I kind of wish if they were going to do, the lots of screw holes, that they would do, like gray screws here, white, maybe silver screws on him, black screws elsewhere. That would have been kind of cool. But they didn't do that. Next up is our two little Mogura. That's our mole drills for you. So here we have Straight Gao and Spiral Gao. Again, the sculpting and detail on these is fantastic. This time around, though, both of these are the exact same figure. They're both the exact same sculpt. The only difference is the way they painted the eyes. Here, they painted the eyes to match the sculpted detail. You can see that. Whereas here, they painted sort of sad-looking eyes, but you can kind of see the outline from the sculpted detail. And of course, the drill bits are different, but they are separate pieces. They're just in there on a 5mm peg. And I will say I really like the gold paint on these. It is a nice metallic gold. And also the orange is a nice metallic orange. I don't know how well that's coming off on camera. So the paint and the sculpting and the detail is very nice on these specifically. I will say I do have one issue with these figures. Another point subtracted, and that is these side panels right here where the little back treads are. They don't plug into place. They just hang loose. Now they're not floppy. You can see I can shake it and you get a very, very minimal in the way of movement. So they're not loose yet. They could become loose over time depending on how much you dig around with this. That is what it is. Next up, we have Gadget Gao, our bird o' prey with the thrusters and whatnot. And he looks really, really good. We got some 5mm pegs up here on top. That's for doing some shenanigans. You can see we got the little claws down here as well as the fin pieces, or the main pieces for GaoGaiGar Complete. We have little flame effects back here. We do get some articulation in this head, which is mostly for GaoGaiGar mode. It does detach up here when you do this, and it doesn't like to stay attached when you do this, but you can get some, somewhat bird-like poses if you want to do that. My one gripe with this, besides that not staying in, is that there's nothing to cover up the hands here in this mode. So every version of GaoGaiGar under the sun, with the exception, I think, of the original Takara, has cover pieces, because in the show he's got vents here, and the vents go away and the hands come out. And even like the mini claw and the solar token, and I just dumped a bunch of stuff all over the floor, and the real grade model kit, you can see here, that's little cover vents that reveals the hands underneath. So it's kind of a bummer that we don't get that. Not an end of the world type thing, but it is what it is. I guess I should point out none of these have any kind of rolling wheels or anything. They're just sculpted static. All right. Now, before we look at GaiGar specifically, let's look at the other accessories we get. So we get some claw effect pieces, the Hell and Heaven claws, for doing the Hell and Heaven. We get the Protect Shade effect piece, which is a little meh. And we'll show that off when we get into GaoGaiGar mode specifically. We get the Bolting Driver, as well as 3 different bits for it, which I honestly do not remember these 2 bits. We got a little screw one here and a little straight one here. And these do not have big enough holes in the back of them to plug in anything. And this actually is, it comes together in one piece with the green part, and then this piece is separate. But this part of the green is a separate piece, all this clear plastic. And if you can, I don't know how well you can see this on camera, but you can already see where this is all the splitting and cracking. Right there, right there. Just from the friction of it being connected together. So I'm probably not going to take this bit out. Now, granted, you can't do the Genesic bolt effect where, he launches the bolt out of the mouth anyway, so yeah, we'll just leave it. And then, of course, we have the Will Knife, which looks pretty good. And moving on to GaiGar himself. Now, he does come in robot mode, just like so. And again, that metallic gold and metallic orange on him is just gorgeous. It really is. Now, of course, he does have some good painting and detail, but he is missing some paint apps, like right here on his thighs and on his shoulders, up here in the little vents up here. They did get the little orange on his crest, though. And I really like the metallic green on the G-stone in his head. Looks pretty good. The one real gripe I have about this is, once again, well, 2 real gripes. Again, you got the big black screws on the back, which not too big of a deal until you get into galleon mode, which we'll show that off here shortly. But the other thing is, of course, the great big huge wide butt flap. So the way this is engineered for its articulation in GaoGaiGar mode is pretty clever, but it's not so clever that it can fold up and be, out of the way, which is absolutely terrible. I mean, the butt flap on GaoGaiGar, or GaiGar specifically, is accurate. He has a butt flap, but every GaiGar under the sun, it folds up. Even the little mini claw managed to have it fold up and still be articulated. And that's more how it's supposed to be. You don't really see it that much from the front. It's not a great big eyesore. Here, you gotta wonder how he does anything with all this junk in his trunk. But hey, now he's got some articulation here, so he does have a universal joint on a ratchet right here. Nice clicky ratchet. As well as a friction in and out right here. It goes about that far until you hit the shoulders, but these pieces do swoop into place, and you can get them a little bit farther if you want to break his shoulder. You can do that. We do have bicep swivel, elbow bends. We are articulated at the articulated at the wrist in 2 locations. So we have right here at the cuff where the galleon claw is at, and then again down here at the actual hand. We do have a waist swivel. We do have universal hip joints. Again, nice clicky ratchets. Nice big range of movement right there. We get the thigh swivel, double jointed knees, which every GaoGaiGar, even the original, had double jointed knees, so you know, that's expected. Then we have rotating front parts of the feet, as well as a toe up and down, nothing at the heel, and we do also have a head swivel. Now, due to the way this transforms, you can at least move these up and out or in and down a little bit if you so choose, but that's about all you're getting out of that. Now, transformation into Galleon. We'll go ahead and close his mouth right here. We'll take the hands and turn them this way and fold these down. Then we'll go ahead and lift up back here ever so slightly. It wiggles just a little bit, but that gives you enough clearance to get in here and pop out the dinky little tail. And then we'll go ahead and close these around his thighs, just like so. We'll rotate at the waist, close the arms up like so, then just bend the knees backwards and line up those back feet, be in line with the front feet. Then we'll pop this head up, move this like that, and rotate around. And this will snap into place. It's very tight snap. I've had it pop off the ball joint that it's on more often than I've had it pop into place. And then we want to go ahead and pull this little piece up right there. And there we have our Galleon, which there's not really too much anything new to see here. It's you know, all the same bits as GaiGar. So not the most impressive Galleon. I feel like a lot of the Galleons are a little less impressive than they appear in the show, just because, you know, they still have to transform. I do feel like this piece here is too far back. It should be a little further up, but it clips into there, so it kind of needs it. You get all the same articulation points, so I'm not going to go over the articulation again. But if you don't plug this in, you do have a ball joint right here in the back of the neck, so you can get a little bit of movement here if you want to do that. And again, the mouth can open and close, and I really do like the way they have this hinged, where they have it hinged, because it gets that nice sort of stretching out effect as a result, and it looks pretty cool. And here they are. Here is Galleon with a hot rod, an X-Kaiser, and a Lio Convoy. So you can see how that all scales together. And lastly, but because, hey, what the heck, why not? Can't speak today. Here he is with the Solar Shikoken GaoGaiGar series. So you can see how those scale. I don't have the original GaoGaiGar anymore. I had to part ways with him a long time ago. But the Solar Shikoken is very, very similar in scale to the original figure. All right, so now for all of the different combinings that you can do here. So if you've had any version of GaoGaiGar ever, you might be sort of familiar with everything that, you know, it's supposed to be able to do, even things that it didn't do in the show. But first and foremost, if you want to, you can take your little swimming boys here and you can just plug them on here, and that's the thing. Likewise, you can also plug them on here using those little 5mm pegs and ports right there, so you can have them being carried here. Also, you can, just like the regular GaoGaiGar, you can totally ram GaiGar's fists up their asses. It was more elegant when it was just a drill tank, but now that they're little animal drill tanks, it's literally ramming his fist up their asses. So you actually need to go ahead and pop them open. Right here, you can see there is a little 5mm post right there, and you may need to go ahead and collapse these down, just like so. Maybe go ahead and fold these up, and get them out of the way, and you ram that fist right up the booty hole, and then you're going to have his hand grab onto that peg, which is easier said than done, especially when you're on a camera in an awkward position trying to do this. There we go. And once you get it in there, you just close it back up, and boom, now you can do a total drill punching punch thing. Punch. And of course, this is where having all this little bits here and the big extra wide butt flap really do get in the way, but that's a thing you can do. And lastly, you can have Gadget Gao kill him. Just kill him. He's a traitor. You stay. Anyway, you can have Gadget Gao plug onto his back to carry him, just like you could with Stealth Gao on the original GaoGaiGar. To pull this off, you're going to want to take the feet here, and you're going to want to twist them to the side on the very, very squeaky joints. I don't know how well you can hear that. And we're going to pop these up and fold them forward. You've got this little armature right here, just like so. And then right here, you can see this little piece right here. That will flip up, which is not always easy to do. There we go. And then snap into place just like so. And then he's got two ports right there that you can plug that in there. And then down here on the backs of the wings, these little pieces right here can fold out. And those become stabilizers, so you can have him standing with Gadget Gao basically holding him up like a display stand. So I'm going to do something a little dirty, guys, because this is going to be a really long one. So I'm going to call this the end of part 1 of this review. And then part 2, we'll go over the full, proper Genesic GaoGaiGar, if you will. And so, yeah, stay tuned for that. That should be coming up within the next couple of days. Y'all have a good one.